Law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. This is your host, Eric, and today I'm joined by Doug White. Doug, thanks for coming on the show, man.
I appreciate you having me, man. This is quite the honor for me to be able to get to share some time with you and your audience. And I only have really one question for right now.
Okay.
Did you miss me?
I missed you. You already know before the recording.
That's why I asked it.
Yeah, the avid followers that are on the socials probably saw some cross-pollination between me and Doug on LinkedIn or on Instagram, kind of some nudging to his book. We will get into all that, but yeah, essentially, I just kind of want to recap because I think it's super cool. Like in this community, in this space, everyone in first responder community or law enforcement community knows and feels this like very unique, very, very special, almost sacred relationship between others that serve in this capacity and have served in this capacity. But there's also this unique pocket that I've talked about before, which is this kind of online content creating kind of, I don't want to say influencer, let's say influential folks, like especially because you could niche that down to a positive wellness focus, like constructive mindset niche. And our friend and peer, John Kelly, is who connected us. So folks that are active in following or even in this space or just trying to find positive content, like they know John Kelly, law enforcement life coach, right down in Florida. And so he connected us because you had written your book and you're dipping your toe into the idea of coming out and talking about your career, your story, you've started a podcast. So by the time this airs, it will be in, full swing. So people check that out. Tell This Story podcast. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. And then in your book,
it's Hiding in Plain Sight, the truth about trauma, service, and the way forward.
Yeah. So we got connected and I got to see some of what you're posting and just pitching some different things. You sent me the book. And then I was just down at the time of this recording recently down in Orlando speaking with the Second Alarm Project on first responder wellness, mostly a fire crowd. But then, we had some cops there and Doug was there in attendance and got to meet you. I was like, I got to read this book before I meet the dude. And then I just crushed it. Like I like dabbling in reading, but I'm not like the avid, like cover to cover. But man, like I was taken in and I destroyed that book in the flight over, making all these notes on my phone on all these things I want to talk about. And we will not be able to cover even a significant portion of it today. And so we'll probably have to cover it more on your show and subsequent episodes. But I've been talking a long time, but I just kind of wanted to give people that story as to like, we were able to break bread together, chat on all these things that are so crucial as you are now in the, I like to say, fake retired life. You served, you hit over 30 years or just under?
I had 25 years to the day with the sheriff's office, but I had 14 and a half years in the military, which was prior to and concurrent with.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's
so
a
31
service.
Years right at.
Yeah. So exactly my point, doing so much for the space. And then now, you're a writer, you're a speaker, you're a podcast host, you're a podcast guest, you're a content creator, which those that know, even though they dabble in creating social media for like their family and vacations, like it is a lot. So super excited to have you on and be able to share you and share our conversations with the audience, man.
It's great to be here, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hit me. Give me the hard questions because I have a feeling you're going to peel back some layers on me today.
No,
you're always very thoughtful and methodical. Yeah, you will.
I don't think so. They shouldn't be hard questions. And I think what's cool about this project is just having conversations about, our different and sometimes overlapping experiences and then just what we see for career. But I do have some notes, and in your book, I thought it was cool. We talked about this a little bit, but you came, down in Florida. You came through and lived in Memphis for a little bit, and then you came to the PNW because of Fort Lewis. Now, Lewis McChord. Um, I was born in Memphis, and then mostly grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm like, man, even like where the guy has lived, like we have those experiences in common. Yeah, what are your reflections on the Pacific Northwest? I know a little bit about it, but for the audience, a lot of people that listen in are more local to this area.
Well, the late 1900s was a crazy time.
Yeah, the Seattle
I was
fire.
too young to really appreciate it, to be honest with you. And I've wanted to go back to really enjoy the outdoors. I was there from 93 to 97. And it was the height of the grunge music scene. I mean, Seattle was a 40-minute drive, depending on who was driving, a 40-minute drive away from McChord. You hit I-5 and you are, Space Needle clubs and all that stuff. So you would have the big grunge music scene going on down there at all the bars and clubs, and, not like the Tacoma scene, at the time.
Yeah.
So they'd have the little bars, on, South Tacoma Way and stuff like that. But it wasn't like it was, in Seattle. So we'd go to a club and, it'd be somebody with special guest, whoever. And, Eddie Vedder comes up on the stage as a special guest doing an acoustic set. It's like, oh, this is so cool,
Yeah.
So a lot of time there. I spent a little bit of time skiing and hiking, but none of the fishing or camping or big hiking, none of that stuff. I mean, I was 19 to 23 years old.
Yeah.
So it was, micro beer at the time. Rainier beer and all that stuff. And then is that even still
such
a
a
thing?
cult classic now? Yeah,
Is that still a thing?
Yeah, Rainier's huge. Like Olympia, the tagline, it's the water, which is the worst tagline ever because it's like,
for beer,
like water beer. Yeah. That went away. A lot of little ones went away, but Rainier is kind of this, and people like wear Rainier apparel. There's like the Rainiers, the minor league team. So it's it's very much a thing.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it was all that. The stuff that you did as a teenager, looking for fun, and a lot of good music, a lot of good food. Just really, it was a beautiful, when it wasn't raining, it was beautiful. And, I don't think I've been to a more beautiful place, just driving through the mountains and, doing all the things outdoors that I wish I'd taken more advantage of. I wish I'd taken more pictures. So the Pacific Northwest experience was wasted on a young man. And I'd love to go back and revisit some of that stuff.
I think in you, if you do want to, you shall, right? And we'll hang out up here. But I don't hear you to be a guy of regret, but it is meaningful to be like, what would I like to do, here forth? But I think most people listening would be like, man, I would hang out in the 90s for the grunge scene and go see the nature stuff later because it's still there, right?
Yeah, that's what I did, man. I took full advantage of it.
Yeah.
I remember we would get paid on Friday or a payday weekend by Monday after coming back from a weekend in Seattle. I'm like, okay, I've got 38 cents a day between now and next payday. So it looks like I'm eating at the chow hall. So, yeah, it was a good time.
Nice. One thing, I guess I'll just jump into the meat and potatoes in some way. But one thing that struck me is reading about your story and for those that are unaware, like when I look at your story, your career, a lot of it to make it like into themes is like this like hard charging, extremely productive, just like workhorse, right? Like you were just like seek and destroy as far as like you're given a task, you'll take on 3 more and just crushing work. And I think that resonates with a lot of us in first responder work, but like police work as well, because, and I don't truly know, like, I don't know what it's like in the fire service, certain things, like all these projects and things, but I do know in policing, there's so much work that will never get done. Like you'll never, especially admin tasks and those that are, and I don't mean administrators per se, I mean like people that need to plan. So even instructors, right? People that are developing training and like trying to refine best practice, SOPs, policies, like you'll never be done. But you're the guy that just took on more and more. You became a specialist, ICS, bomb stuff, explosives. But even so, I laid that groundwork to ask you this because reading about your like childhood, like it didn't read like anyone was pushing you to like, you had to hit the grind and you had to achieve and you had to prove yourself and all this stuff. You're kind of like, you reflected pretty positively about your childhood. I'm curious where that drive came from because it became such a defining part of your persona and your professional image.
That came from my military time, not my my first stint on active duty, but in 1997, I was fortunate enough to be selected for a position here at MacDill at Headquarters Special Operations Command, or SOCOM. I'm sure people have played the video games, but they were the major command that handles all special operations within the Department of Defense. And growing up, my since you mentioned the childhood, it was a positive childhood. I mean, my quality time with Dad was shining his work shoes for the coming week. He was a salesman, and learning how to put polish on shoes and watching old black and white war movies. So I come from a family of service, and service meant a great deal to me. So when I went into the Air Force, that became my new adult persona, service, being an airman, esprit de corps, being part of something greater than oneself. And when I came off my first active duty hitch and went into the active reserves, I went into Air Force Special Operations Command as a member of security forces, and found out about a position that I applied for, and I got it at SOCOM. But when I got there, the level of people that were in the soft enterprise, as it were, is a whole different level. And that bar is raised every single, if you blink, if you take vacation, if you take leave, you come back, the bar has changed. If you had to do 10 pull-ups, it's now 12 pull-ups, and that's over the course of a weekend, just as an example.
Yeah.
People there, they don't force you to be better. They inspire you to be better just by their own actions and their presence. So I think, and this is not something I knew then, this is something that I've had conversations about through journaling and writing the book and really chewing on it. I found that my drive to just be better and to achieve came from there. I wanted to prove desperately that I deserved the company that I kept. And I was very, very fortunate and blessed to have those men and women in my life during that time. I've learned so many valuable lessons that I still use today. And I'm still in contact with 98% of my teammates today.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, I'm such an avid believer and fan of iron sharpens iron. Like, you got to find people that challenge you. And sometimes you got to step outside of your little work group or your, I'm not saying my department, so people don't get it twisted, but I'm saying, like, I know a lot of cops that are like, man, like, I don't really have that mentor. I don't have someone pushing me or a peer pushing me in my department. It's like, cool. Like, that's where this day and age, you can find all these mentors, remote mentors. You may not even talk to them, but you might listen to Doug today and be like, man, I feel like he's cheering me on. Like, I feel like I can metabolize some of what he's putting out and I can take that on for myself. At the same time, like, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think a lot that goes to work ethic, that goes to mindset. Are we being constructive? Are we pervasively making excuses and being toxic? Because we all have our tendencies. Have you found something as far as like maybe in career or maybe now, because a lot of your reflection and that you share in your story, share in your book, is recognizing when the pervasive like identity became too much, like something that I would call a guardrail or like a ceiling or a cap, because like, it's great to be inspired by folks, but at the same time, it sounds like even you step away for a moment and now you're missing out. Like, the train's blasting ahead and you're going to be left at the station. Like, some sort of grace allowed to yourself to not have to do this insurmountable amount of growth.
At the time, there were no guardrails. I had no personal or professional boundaries in place. I never said no to the bosses. You give me X to execute, it gets executed on time, under budget, and right the first time. That's what I prided myself in. I was that guy, to the detriment of everything else. I was not getting off the proverbial train. It wasn't going to happen because it's a one-way track. It's never coming back to pick you up. At least that's what we were taught, in the profession as a whole. You never say no to the bosses because they'll never ask you again. And that was just the culture that I came up in. So I never said no. And, now doing what I'm doing, I don't have to do any of this. And I have to remind myself of that because, as you say, I guess the remote or drive-by mentors or influences that I've had, I see what you're doing. It's like, okay, Eric's doing this. I've got to get a graphic in the lower right-hand corner of my podcast screen. I have to remind myself that I've been down that road before and I know what that looks like and I know what it leads to. So personal and professional boundaries. It's something that John Kelly told me. He's like, hey, bro, if it doesn't include Mrs. Kelly, and if it, it's not between 10 and 3 Monday through Thursday, it doesn't get my attention. So I need to remind myself that I have a tendency to sink my teeth into things and just tear the life out of it until it becomes what I wanted it to be. Then I'll find something else.
Yeah.
And I can't do this with, the mission that I'm on now, the purpose that I'm on now. It has to be authentically me on my terms, because other people now that I'm aware, other people pay for my inattention to the things that are important.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple things there I love, and one is the shout out to John again, and that's like those hard and fast boundaries, right? We had those conversations on this show before where John gave that type of example. He's like, "Hey, like if you need me, bro, like call me, right? But if you're calling me and it's not like you're having a bad time, it's like, hey, what do you think about? Hey, dude, it's 9 p.m. Like this is Mrs. Kelly time, like."
Yeah.
And that comes from lessons of not recognizing that valuable space to preserve for those, and sometimes I say those people, but maybe that person that is like most critical to us, right? Like that
Yeah.
is our person and our partner, right? So
I love that you
there's
say that it's my person. I love that. I love every
yeah,
bit of that.
man, and I hope, I know most people listening get where it's coming from, but when we say these things, it's like because we're not perfect, right? Like the
Mhm.
whole example, and I'll say like why I ask you about this overwork, over identities, because I've grappled with that, right? I've continued to grapple with it. So it's, a full-time career. It's trying to be, solid dad. It's trying to, build this in a responsible way. But even this Blue Grit project, like there's times where I can look back in the last year where I felt like it was too much, right? I'm at this point in time, I'm consciously toggling down how much raw time I spend on different things like social media or
Mhm.
editing, and the pace of executing, like putting out 3 episodes a week. At the time that this recording goes out, I've toggled down to 2 a week, and there's a couple things that like maybe that is better for the audience because you can listen to them all. I presume
Mhm.
that people listening to podcasts are not listening to just mine, but at the same time, it's also allowing myself that space because I think we're a lot alike in that, and that's why I wanted to nerd out and pick your brain on it because something's going well, I want it to go better, right? So as the show has grown, I'm like, how do I throw more logs on, right? That's how I got to doing three a week. And people are like, how are you doing all this? I'm like, well, I do it on my days off, but shoot, I now moved closer to the mountains, closer to nature, like a very intentional thing for me and my family. But, in the first year living out here, like I barely hit the trails because I was working on this stuff so much. And that was like
Mhm.
in the summertime. So like, kind of what am I doing? Do I care about this project? Absolutely. Do I care about the purpose? Absolutely. But do I also care about myself and wanting just to decompress because that will help me do all these things in life better? Yes, I know that to be true, but it's so slippery. And so I even appreciate that example, bringing that up with John and, Chris Luttrell. We did a joint episode, but in a separate episode, I think Chris said something similar where he's like, hey man, like 9 p.m. is my bedtime. He's like, so if you need a ride from the airport, like I'll call you an Uber or I'll encourage you because you make good money too. Like, it's like I will get you at 4 p.m. because you're my guy, you're my gal, right? But 9 p.m. that's bedtime. Like I gotta preserve me, and that's what's gonna make me fully functional, optimized for the next day. Sorry,
Yeah.
like Uber time.
Yeah. Your yes ends at my no.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's
you know,
slippery.
an analogy that we used to use was if you're driving code to get to a call to back up another officer and you get into a crash. Well, now you've just taken an
You're
ambulance,
no
paramedics, a
good.
fire
Yeah.
engine,
Hmm.
two more deputies or officers, and a
Yep.
supervisor to go to your crash. And that's just if you traded paint.
Yeah.
You are useless to the person you're going to save
Yeah.
if you are not taking care of yourself. And I think that's just that's the huge point of self care. If you're not, they said it at the Second Alarm Project. You can't pour from an empty cup. And if
Yes.
you're not full yourself, you're of no value to anybody else.
Yep.
So you have to be intentional about you. And that sounds awful because that's not what we do.
Hmm.
We fill ourselves by serving others, but
Yep.
you can't serve if you're not recharged yourself. So
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean that is the whole crux of why we talk about the majority of things we talk about, right? Where we know it's possible to push and to push and to push. And then we're running on fumes and we trick ourselves, mostly out of survival, I think, and the necessity at the time. We trick ourselves that can be enough and that can be normal, but you're absolutely right. I think the empty glass is one of the best metaphors for that, because then you're just getting drips, right? If
yeah,
that, or the illusion of pouring. But yeah, it's not sustainable. I think that's what everyone can agree on.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in your career and book, and cutting back to that, I think one of the things that you depict so well, and I mean, I've told you this, and I kind of didn't want to tell you until I hopped on recording to see how you react, but it's an excellent read. Yeah, he's covering his face
I might
for
look
those
surprised for you.
yeah. Man, it's like just really well written, and I can say I'm a writer because I am paid to write sometimes, but it's just really well written. Like the storytelling is really good. I mean, the vocabulary, you're like SAT ready. Like if you want to study for the SATs, yeah, just or give this book to maybe a very emotionally responsible and emotionally advanced kid. But I'm pausing because there's a lot of traumatic stuff in the book, which is the second part I want to hit. One is that it's really well written, and not all books are in the first responder space, because I don't blame them. They're not writers. We're not all writers, but yours is really well written. So I want to shout out to that.
Thank you.
The second part is I wonder how much, when you're talking about some of these traumatic calls and you're talking about interacting with like that dad that just lost his daughter, and the way you describe it, it really like it, you feel something. I felt a lot. I felt a lot reading it. And it is to say, one, you capture that really well, and two, I think it's a healthy nod to ourselves as first responders of, man, how many times have I been to a scene like this that I purposefully don't actively think about? And so there is a bit of a warning in there. It's like maybe not read the book at an inopportune time, when you have to get your game face on or something. But it is to say that how much stuff do we bear that we like shuttle down inside? I mean, I'm someone that does feel like I actively think about things and I actively explore feelings. And at the same time, man, like when you detailed like that scene, I started thinking about all these similar scenes, and that blood curdling kind of response from a family member when they find out that their loved one is gone. You talked about how you were you thought, dad's marching towards you, and you're going to if he was going to assault you, you're going to take it. And I had this
Yeah.
exact same, exact same thoughts and feelings like about a year to 2 years ago. And this is like, yeah, I'm at a desk a lot of times, but I was at this homicide scene, and I was going to tell the family, like, that he's gone. And I was just ready to just stand there and be a punching bag. And I think that some cops might be like, what are you talking about? But I think other cops would be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Right. So just a way to capture that. I just felt like that was very impactful. It's not even a good enough word, but it's just something that I have not seen to that maybe ability in a lot of books I've seen.
I appreciate that, man. It's all very kind. I would tell stories, or I would talk to people, and how I speak is the way that I write. And people have told me write a book. It's like, no, nobody's going to read a book. What am I going to tell funny stories, stupid stuff that people want to hear at parties? But a lot of the things that I wrote, and I want to tell the people who are listening who haven't read the book yet, yes, to stick with the theme of your brand. It gets gritty. It does, and it's there for a reason. It's not to establish a baseline of trauma or bad calls or to shock the senses. It's there because I learned something valuable in each one of those instances. One of the bigger reasons that those are in there is because those are things that I had never put words to. To be completely honest, they're in those vignettes that are in the book. Maybe one of those would have even cracked the top 10 of horrific scenes that I've been to. So they're not there for shock. They're there to show the lessons and the growth that I learned, even post-retirement after that. My problem is I have a very good memory. And those things, when they're seared into your memory, I can recall the taste, the smell, the thought, the feeling. And a lot of those vignettes, when I was recounting them, just through journaling, by the way, this wasn't an outline. None of this book was an outline. This came from me journaling and writing my thoughts in a chronological order. And those things just came out of me. When you're journaling or you're typing in your laptop, there's no judgment. It's just you. There's no ego. You're not measuring words. You're letting it flow. So that was a healthy thing for me. One. Then when I had the manuscript, and I didn't know it was called a manuscript, it was a stack of papers that could have been a book. But using the terms now that I am published, I guess, manuscript, I gave it to Michelle, which is my wife. And, this July we'll have been married 25 years.
Congrats.
And thank you. And she read the manuscript. And she said, there's things in here that we never spoke about. And I said, there's things in there that I've never put words to.
Yeah.
So this was the book experience, the speaking now. It's all still very raw. I mean, this book is only 4 months old. And journaling and sitting with those things to see what I thought about myself and those experiences, and then transforming what was a journal of self-deprecation and building my house in Victimville. I had to sit with those things and ask, why am I speaking to myself this way when nobody else would have ever seen that or guessed? To what hiding in plain sight is now, it was like sawing off my arm. And as odd and as counterintuitive as it sounds, it's been actually the most healthy thing that I've ever done for myself. So just to get it out. So yeah, that.
Yeah. There's a lot of points there. And even for those that are like, I'm never writing a book, I have become such a proponent, even in the time from starting this podcast or maybe midway through, where I was like, yeah, I've journaled on and off and I've never been avid. Like, more and more, I have a strong belief in it. And the reason why is because we just have this nonstop chatter in our brains. And this is also a nod to meditation or forms of, and I'm getting better at that. I'm definitely less comfortable or proficient in meditation, but we just have all this mental chatter all the time, and it goes like a million miles a second, and it's just noise, right? Like, and how do you quiet that noise, especially in whether it's type A or just these doer types in our professions and cultures, and then you add the layers of stress and competing responsibilities and trauma and all these things, and it just becomes more and more and more just noise. How do you suss through that? And journaling, your brain can only go a certain speed to form coherent sentences, and then it can only go a slower speed to type or write them into actual words without all the scribble and like typos, and it has to make sense, like subject, predicate, punctuation. And so it is such a way that you can form it into actual cohesive thoughts. And then I find that as you write them, you're processing them a different way than thinking them. Because you could think like, yeah, cool, I'm on a walk, I'm thinking all this stuff. No, but it's just noise again, right? Like, how do you put it through a strainer to make more meaning of it for yourself and for reflection? And then as you're typing it, your eyes are writing it, your eyes are reading it, and you're kind of reading it in your head, right? And so now it's another layer of hearing and understanding your own voice reading it. And so that's where I found so much more power. And then even making some nudges of like, hey, you should go look at some of these things again at some point. We talked about this in Florida, but like writing down your values and virtues. Like, we all know what our values are. We've all lived certain, like, a bunch of years on this world, and so we formed them. But like, what are they? If called on in a room and it's like, hey, what are your values? How many people could rattle them off? And that's something I'm working on, right? Like, I've written them down, and I set a reminder in my phone calendar just to revisit them, like, monthly. And so that's my little nudge of like, you can hear all these things, like, if you hear Doug speak, you're going to get all these nuggets. And then if you hear me speak, you're going to get these nuggets. But like, how do you actually put that into practice? And for me, it's like, I got to build it into a system. So monthly, I got to read my mission and I got to read my values.
I love that, man. We did talk about that in Orlando, and I've been working on that myself since that conversation.
Good. Yeah, man.
How does that feel? I was hoping to have them done so I could reveal them today, but a lot of noise. So I'm just trying to sort through that. And that, to the point that you brought up earlier about boundaries, 3 episodes a week. I was recording 5 a week just to release once a week.
Yeah.
Trying to get ahead because I was still that guy. And I found that there was so much noise out there, and a lot of the noise I was creating myself. And it's like, stop. Why did I begin all of this? And I had to really turn inward. And we talked about this a little bit. There's a pivot coming of, taking a knee and facing out, figuring stuff out. And then something will be released probably in police week is when I think I'm going to do it, ceremoniously.
Cool. Yeah.
But, yeah, man, I need to work on the values so I can have that ready and check that with this way forward on this purpose.
Yeah. And I think, and this is not like a circle back, like, look at how cool we are, but it is to say that we are both very accomplished in our adult lives or in our lives. Like, we have a lot of things that we're extremely proud of, professionally and otherwise. And it is to say that we still have this, like, this negative self-talk, this noise, this self-inflicted noise of like, is this good enough? What should I be doing? And I think are you familiar with parts work, like kind of like internal family systems? Kind of like we all have these parts of us. That episode will be airing in about a week from our conversation. So look out for that, Doug. But then for others, it'll like look back, it'll be Robin Saunier. She's a counselor, therapist, but basically she dives into a bit of what that all means. And in essence, it's like, as we grow up, we have these experiences, and so they become a part of us. So I'll speak from my experience. It's like, there's a part of me that is industrious, and that's not like pat myself on the back initially. It's like, sometimes I work really hard because that's how I get validation. That's how I prove value from my upbringing, right? You work hard, you get good grades, and you've earned a spot at this table. So that manifests in really great ways. Like, my hard work has gotten me basically probably everything awesome in my life. But that hard work is also one of my own worst enemies, where nothing's good enough. where as a young sergeant, I was overbearing. I was a micromanager, right? Because I'm like, man, doesn't everyone want to be their best? And what does that look like from my perspective, right? As a young, much more immature person, that's just how I thought I could serve the best way, right? I've come to learn a lot since then. But it's almost just acknowledging and then accepting all that with grace, not to say, hey, like, go sit in the corner, hard work part of Eric. It's like, no, like you have value here, but sometimes I'm going to tap you out and be like, hey, like you're good, right? Like we need the other part that's like the accepting part of Eric to be like, hey, cool, like what else are we going to do here? What's the big picture? Okay, we need to power down a little bit.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but yes, industrious, I would say so. Again, to my own detriment. You know, the validation, doing the work, being the guy when the guy needed to be, you know, and basically walking into a room and everyone knowing that you're in control or you have control of the situation without ever having to say a word. That was the thing. You know, when I would teach academy classes, I would tell people there's a book called Arresting Communication. It was about not serial killers, but people who had murdered law enforcement officers. Why did you think, you know, one of the parts of the book was, why did you attack them? Well, you know, they got out of the car and, you know, I looked at them, their belt was messed up, their boots were nasty, their uniforms unfit, they looked out of shape. And I, you know, didn't want to go back to prisons. I attacked them because I knew I could win. But if somebody gets out, they look the part, they're in good physical shape, their uniform's squared away, they look like they're about business. I'm just going to take whatever comes because I know I can't beat them. Well, I would tell kids in the academy, you know, your job is to be that person physically in the way that you present yourself, because we all know that, you know, the first step of the use of force continuum is presence. You can turn off 99% of assaults or bad things that can happen to you just by presence, just by the way by the way you treat people, but the way you enter a room. And you should want to be, or I always wanted to be, the person that when you walk into a room for people to stop and say, you know, in a professional standing, that's who I want to be. I don't have to ask how shiny my boots need to be because I look at his boots and I see exactly how shiny they have to be. I know that I need to shine my belt buckle because Doug shines his belt buckle. My gear is always serviceable. It's checked. It's clean because Doug's is. His uniform is pressed. His hair's cut. He's clean shaven. He's all about business when business needs to be done. And I think setting that example, being that example, and seeing others set that example, that's what I wanted to be. So that's what I used to focus on. And there was no grace for myself, no self-grace. I never gave myself an opportunity to tap or say, you know, maybe we should set this one out and give somebody else a chance. If somebody else wanted a chance, they should have stepped up. You know, there was no grace. And again, I'm here talking about the things that I did wrong. And there's a book about them and things I could have done better. I think, you know, you talked about emotional maturity. I think as we mature in age and mature in the profession, whatever our profession is, we learn valuable lessons of things we can do better, like being the micromanaging sergeant. You know, you may not have had a mentor that was a sergeant before you. Say, this is the way, young man. You know, and you have to find those things out the hard way. And I certainly did. Yeah, I think giving yourself a little bit of grace goes a long way, and emotional maturity does as well. Yeah. You know, if you get everything right the first time, well, there's no fun in that, right?
For sure. And I think it's, you know, I did have really great examples prior, right? But I also had, for me, and everyone's different. That's like the whole thing with parenting or being a supervisor or anything, right? Or being a peer even, right? Like everyone's different and they need to be coached and led in different ways to a degree. And so what I mean by that is like, I actually appreciated sergeants that would ride me and they're like, hey, I know you got more. And then they'd kick back reports for the littlest error because they're like, hey, I want the defense to challenge you and I want you to put them in their place, right? And so that became a thing for me. And then it was received so poorly by a lot of people. And I don't blame them, right? Especially if that's not categorically what happens and you thought because people rode you and you appreciate it, you thought that was the expectation of the role. Meanwhile, a lot of sergeants were not doing that. And so I stuck out. And so for no fault of anyone's but my own, just maybe being unaware of like the cultural context and like what the environment was. Now, I don't regret having high standards for myself and those that worked under me. I have been told that a lot of the relationships got better, especially as I eased up and we found that middle ground of like meeting expectations and speaking the same language. But yeah, for sure, like I don't think that I would be anywhere near as capable or as trust building having not had those those lessons learned from not ideal, right? Unideal or missteps or mistakes, which is really a lot of why this project and in a lot of ways yours exist, is learn from me. Like I'm trying to gift you wisdom. That's that's what all this is. That's where, quote unquote old timers, and I'm really essentially one of them these days, but all these folks that are like, hey, like listen to my story because I want to save you that, right? Like maybe you can experience like a diet version or not any of the scrutiny because I've been there and it sucked.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. At first, hiding in plain sight was meant to be a cautionary tale. Exactly that. Don't do it this way. I would run headlong into and face first into humility. I was you challenge me, I'm going to double down, and we'll see who's right. So the book was supposed to be that. Just don't do it this way. I valued my career, enjoyed successes, but I could have done it in a much healthier way for myself and for my family. And that's where the caution came from. And, I think that this generation of first responders, they are a lot more in touch with their feelings and more emotionally intelligent. They're aware of who they are and what they expect. And I don't think the whole suck it up and drive on mantra that I got is going to land well with this generation of responders. And I love that. And I think that they're going to be the ones that change the culture and our disciplines. And I think that you and I and people like us are in the right place at the right time with the right message for the right people who are going to receive it. And I hope they do, man. I really do. Because we should be healthier than we are. We deserve to live better than we're living. And, I think that will fix the recruitment and retention crisis too. So I think there's a lot of wonderful things to be had, if not just for longevity and happiness of life, for having these conversations and learning through us.
Yeah. 100%. I do agree. I think that those that are coming in, or maybe they have a few years on their belt, they are going to make some huge change and progress for our industry and for our society, truly. How do you care for the caretakers? And to be a small piece of that, I'm very humbled, and to be able to watch it, when I'm looking at this career in the rearview mirror, I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm very optimistic on that. I think it's also just recognizing kind of going off of what you said, is like recognizing that there is so much that we are capable of, and we're moving in the right direction. But I mean, that's really the kind of the crux of my presentation. I just wanted to remind us all that we don't have to settle. We don't have to settle for subpar. There are so many narratives, and I'm guilty of owning a lot of them. I have to conscientiously look for them and keep them in check, right? Oh, like hard day, long week, it's gonna suck. I don't have time. I don't have energy for XYZ. It's like, well, if I believe I don't, I certainly don't. Like I've already made that a certainty. So if I question, okay, like is that true? Maybe not. Maybe I just need to get through the next 15 minutes, with my kid because she's gonna go to bed. I can help her with that with a smile on my face, and then it's kind of like that. What's important now, right? All I got to do is the next 15 minutes to be like super dad. I can put it on for a little bit, and then I can go back into the Gil Martin chair or just kind of resting, but then not feel guilty about it either, right? Like I am tired. Like let's be intentional. Let's recognize that there's a reason for this. Not be ashamed. Give grace. With giving grace, that is something that I know is something. It's a work in progress, and it's certainly not a foundational part of your career, which is a lot of your story, right? It is that overwork, over identity, as we talked about. How are you building more, I suppose, guardrails and or support for giving grace to yourself now?
I have to go back, and the reason I was laughing as you were talking, I had a feeling this question was coming, and I have to go back to a counseling session that I had when I first started getting help. And that's in the book when I talked to the doc.
Yeah.
And the doc, he's a former Army MP. He was a deputy that I worked with at the sheriff's office before he became a clinical psychologist. Doc, if you're listening to this, if I messed up your title again, I'm sorry, but he is a doctor. So I went to go see him and, started in this is what's going on. This is what's been going on. I told him about the case, which is also in the book. And, I told him these are the things that I think about myself. And I was really there was no grace that I gave myself. I'd be more than happy to help anybody else and this and that. And he stopped me and he said, Doug, let me ask you this. If one of your troops came to you right now and said, hey, Doug, I'm having all these problems, and laid on you what you just laid on me, what advice would you give them? And I said, well, that's simple. Here's how you fix this, ABC, and all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how it's done. And he's like, man, that's great advice. He said, why would you give someone else better advice than you give yourself? And I kind of stepped back and I was like, shut up, doctor, whatever. You got paper on your wall. That means nothing. You know, I was thinking about that. And,
you're like, damn
you
it,
know,
he's right.
What's that?
Damn it, he's right.
Yeah. And of course. So I had to say, well, so I have to be careful of the way that I speak to myself. Okay. Got it. Check. And, you know, we dove into my regret with my military service. I mean, I discounted 14 and a half years of meritorious service because of an injury from PT.
Yeah.
I mean, I threw away 14 and a half years of what should have been the greatest portion of my life because I got hurt. And, you know, I told him, you know, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I've been carrying around for the better part of 15 years. I'm all of these horrible things, imposter syndrome, guilt, shame, all of it. And he said, Doug, what have your teammates told you about this? Well, I haven't told them. I haven't said anything. He said, okay, well, that's your homework. So I woke up the next day and I started calling my mates. I'm like, hey, guys, I feel this because of this. And Eric, wouldn't you know, they all said almost unanimously, we know. We've always known. We never saw that. One guy said that was never your pack to carry. You know, we know these things, and they never treated me any differently. So this big secret of shame that I was carrying that was crushing me for, you know, 15 years was known. And I thought I was hiding it, you know, but they all knew it. And so they were all very wonderful and very supportive. So when I went back to Doc, I said, yeah, I called my teammates and these are the things they said. And he's like, wow. He's like, okay, so now you've already told me what you feel about these men that you served with. I was like, yes, you know, they're the most capable warriors, most learned men, samurai, warrior poets, every one of them, the best that there is. He's like, oh, okay, cool. And all 10 of them said the same thing. Yep. And he said, okay, so let me ask you this, Doug. Are you the asshole or are they the assholes?
Yeah,
I was like,
right.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. Apparently, I'm the asshole. I'm the only guy that's telling myself these stories. So I need to be careful with the way that I speak to myself and give myself grace. No one is Superman. You can't be expected to be on all the time. And in the moments that you don't show up as the best version of yourself, that may just not be the best that you can give that day. You know, if you're giving A student work and you're turning in A student work, then great. Some days you're only going to be able to turn in C student work, but are you giving it the best you have that day?
Yeah.
And it's a conscious decision, man. We heard about that all week in Orlando. Choice. This is all a choice on how we show up. And I think by giving myself grace and allowing myself that grace, reminding myself that, hey, we know what the wrong way looks like and we know what the right way looks like. Let's make a choice to be kind to ourselves and let that one go. Take a mulligan on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a powerful tool. It's in a lot of respects, right? Like, how do you objectively look at something, and it is to step outside of it and do exactly what the good doc suggested, which is what would your buddy say, or what would you say to your buddy in the same situation? That's been a very useful tool for myself, and you know, a lot of people that work with me or under supervision. Like, I think, you know, like attracts like, and some of these people that are so driven, they're so hard on themselves, like they come to me and in conversations, usually post critical incidents, like they're second guessing themselves. I'm like, okay, like, we know this about you. You're hard on yourself. We talked about this before. What would you say to, you know, your buddy if you guys swap spots on this call? What would you say? And they're like, well, no, it doesn't make sense. They're following protocol, this and that. Like, they only knew what they knew at the time. I'm like, cool, like, know that. And it doesn't mean all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, cool, I'm good. But it is so impactful, right? It is to take yourself out of that seat, put someone else in it. Would you be judging them? Absolutely not. Like, they're doing their best. And like, you'd often never, to your point, think or say some of the pretty terrible things that we think and say to ourselves.
Oh yeah. No, a lot of the things that I said to myself, if someone else had, well, first, no one would have ever dared say it to my face. And if they did, I probably would have punched them.
Yeah.
So
he's not a violent guy, but Doug is.
No, I'm not, but I'm good at it. But
yeah, I love that.
I don't take. I take criticism as long as it's constructive. But if somebody said some of the things that I've said to myself, now it's time to prove it, champ. You know. But anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good. I mean, this is a dude that, if you're not familiar, you know, retired, but like takes care of himself. And as you described, like earlier in your book, that, you know, you're the guy that show up and people kind of act right? Like, because you take care of yourself, because you take care of your presence, your appearance, like, people really didn't fight you. You know, you didn't have to, but you could control people when they need to get controlled. You could win the fight. But I think that says so much. I know that there's there's a lot of younger, newer listeners, whether they're coming in or they're kind of fledgling in their career, and that matters, right? That officer presence absolutely matters. How you enter the room, how you carry yourself, like, and that's why we care about in interviews, right? That's why I preach about it in interviews, whether you're first responder or not. First impressions matter. Like how you decide to run your life. Like people are judging you, even if we try not to be judgmental. No, we're all judging all the time. It's just how our condition is, how we work and how our brains work. I do want to talk about this dynamic, and we talked a little bit about it pre-recording, but what you said earlier, it was meant to be kind of a cursory tale, but I also didn't want, now recognizing that it's not really a cursory tale. And when I listened to your interview with John Kelly before I read the book, and then I read the book, I will say I was nervous about what happened in your career, right? Because it's kind of like the elephant in the room. And we're not going to talk about the specifics purposefully, but when I was reading, I was like, what happened? Like, Doug seems like such a good dude, and did he have this like crazy misstep? We all have our bad moments. We're all human. And then I read what happened, and I was like, holy shit, that's what's happened. Like, and so without getting in the weeds purposefully, we're gonna leave some mystique there and maybe explore it in the future. But I was like, this is so, and I'm trying to be mindful of where the listeners are at with their awareness level of like what they might be picturing based on what I'm saying. But to have your career kind of come crashing on you in all these scrutinizing ways for something that was not categorically like fair, or labor laws and all these things, like I was like, holy shit, this is ridiculous. And so I want to offer that, because for some folks that are aware of like kind of these stories and these tragic events that happen in law enforcement, this is not to shame or blame anyone else in their unique experience, but it is to say, like, I just felt so much compassion towards you. And I felt like in some ways, in very small ways, when I've been scrutinized or I've been, put under the microscope, or in some ways I feel like I'd been vilified for something I was doing at work or outside of work, I was like, man, I feel like he sees me, and I feel what you're putting on the page. And I wager that a lot of cops have felt some smaller version of what you experienced, certainly smaller, because, like, to my point, uncategorically unreasonable from the account. So I put that all out because I really want people to regard everything that they've heard and all the wisdom that you have to share, including that experience and all the wisdom that you have therefrom, because that was clearly such a critical point in why you're doing so many positive, constructive things now, like all of your project and work now.
Well, there's a lot there to unpack. First, I'll say that I have been recounting that story, and when I'm asked questions like this, I have been kinder in my response than probably I could be. I mean, of course, I would be justified to come in hellfire, brimstone, and how dare they, and that was unfair and all that stuff. But we don't get to choose punishment or discipline. We get to choose our response.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose publicly to respond to that in the way that I've always responded to things. As a leader, if a policy was made that I didn't agree with, and I came into roll call and I said, this is stupid, we're not going to do it this way, or came in flipping desks, well, I've just poisoned my entire squad or my platoon. Whatever my sphere of influence is now looking that way. That's not a way to get compliance for policy or a standard or anything. We all know that if you get in trouble in law enforcement, there's a punishment, and then there's also the super secret probation that lasts, that nobody talks about. It's not on paper, but they remember. So a lot of the times people will look to see what your character is during adversity. And I know that had I come home after everything had happened and was woe is me, or flipping tables or upset, then that would be a cue to my kids that this is how we handle adversity. Now, I think adversity introduces us to ourselves and introduces our true character. And I wanted to make sure that shone through during that time. So I did what I always did. I rucked up and drove on. And internally, it was not easy because I was going through all of those feelings. This is a betrayal, whether real or perceived. This is a betrayal. Don't they know my sacrifices, what I've given, and all this other stuff? But Eric, to be honest with you, the truth is this: regardless of what led to discipline or what the discipline was, I had a choice. And had I been listening to myself, listening to others, and truly trying to know myself and the things that I had been experiencing for the better part of 15 to 18 years by that point, I could have at any time made the choice to, one, recognize I need help, and then to have the courage after I recognize that to raise my hand and say I need help, to ask for it. So there was a choice, regardless of the, I call it the fall from the pinnacle of professional success. I call it my breakthrough, my fall or my break, or the fall from grace. All of those things are tongue in cheek, but it really boils down to this. I had a choice. There was a crossroads where I could have made a choice to say, hey, I need to get off this train, take a knee, face out, hydrate, all those things. And I did none of those things. I thought I could outrun and outlast and outpace. And I can tell you that works for a little bit, but at some point, you're going to reach a critical junction, and it may be too far to back up and take the right road that you should have taken prior to. So then you're dealt with, you have to now left with the decision of how am I going to deal with this? And that's what I was. It has taken me a long time to get past the feeling of betrayal and the severity of the discipline that I received, being discredited, disavowed, and later dismissed, the way that I was treated on my last day. And whether that was personal against me because of, how the last 3 years of my career went, or whether that was just the, yes, we knew you personally, we all came up with you, but none of the staff is coming to your retirement party. If that's the way that it was, then that's fine. To me, in retrospect, and even at the time to a degree, that was a representation of their character, not mine. I did what I was supposed to do. I took ownership for everything. I corrected the investigators during the IA investigation when they were wrong. And it didn't help me.
Right.
In fact, I knew it was to my detriment when I said, hey, I'm going to help you make your case. That's never been done in Planet IA. And so to walk out of there without them being able to question my character and then showing true character afterwards, that was important to me. Although inside it was burning me up. I had to deal with those things and I had to own it. And because of that, I'm able to do what I'm doing now. I've become greater than what I could have been had I kept on that road. I want to offer grace to the people making the decision for the discipline. And I want to assume positive intent that they did that because they thought it was righteous. But if I were to look at it as they did it intentionally to harm me, you missed. And if it was done with good intention, I appreciate that, because then that means that they realized that I was incapable of peeling the professional identity and my personal identity. I was completely enmeshed. And I've made that clear in every interview I've done and everything else. I was inseparable from that identity. By the discipline going the way that it did, the organization pulled itself away from me. There was nothing left for me to hang on to. So I was forced to be reintroduced to Doug. Who is this guy? Who am I supposed to be? What am I going to be now? And I'm not going to give them credit for making me, because that's an overstretch. But I was introduced to myself, and I think it revealed who I really was, what I was capable of. And I do that every day. I mean, I'm still learning every day. I'm 5 years beyond that discipline now. And I learned a lot of things in the week that I met you. I've learned things every single day. So it boils down to this. Whatever the discipline was, it doesn't matter. I had a choice and I didn't make the correct choice. I have no choice but to own every bit of that. And I do it graciously. I was wrong. I could have done it better for myself and for my family.
Yeah, you've outlined a lot of things of extreme value. It just said like, oh, good question. Like I was like, I'm pretty sure I didn't have a question. I was just like spitting all these things on my mind, because really you elicited what I was hoping the listeners would hear and get to hear from you, which is this, I want to say extreme ownership, because it is, but also not a Jocko. And you did the little like AI action figure thing, and you did look like Jocko, right? So I think that people that'll get a sense of your presence.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty dope. But this extreme like stoicism, right? Which is that you're like, hey, it is what it is. I know what I can bring to the table, and that is truth, that is objectivity, that is ownership, that is character, virtue, right? Even going back to earlier in what your response was, given the example of being, the Sarge coming in and be like, oh, we got to deal with some BS guys and flipping the table. It kind of changes nothing in what you wanted, but it changes everything in that it's literally you've made everyone worse and have a worse outlook, right?
Yeah.
You've sullied the pool. Whereas I know many supervisors that do this and have done this where like, hey guys, these are the marching orders. We're going to do our best. Like some things go unsaid, but it's like you don't have to be like rah, hey, here's the best example ever. You're like, hey, this is important. We got to do it. And then a lot of troops are like, got it, Sarge. Like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do my checks, or I'm going to do that task, or what have you. Sometimes, it absolutely is helpful to know why, and you can better sell it. But sometimes you don't need to. we got uniforms, we got ranks, do your job, right? If it's not immoral and illegal, like, not a big deal. And we think about it oftentimes. And so I love that example just for the leadership aspect. But then again, like, that organizational betrayal, and I felt it at times for sure. But when I look back most of the time, it's like the organization's not trying to get me. The department's not trying to hurt me. Those are not living, breathing things. Those are just things. I'm assigning these emotions to better, like, again, like, I think we get really defensive if we suggest victimhood in law enforcement. But I think that is the thing holding us back the most, because it is what we can control. We can control whether we take on any kind of victim mentality or not. But your example being like, okay, absolutely, most people that read the story will be like, you were wronged, you were jacked up, that's messed up. However, you're like, well, it happened, and I do have a contributing part to that. I did something that was a mistake, right? I misstepped. And I told the investigators, like, actually, here's a little factor that shows how I misstepped, with specificity. And to remove that is to disarm them from having that control over you, right? And this is me, like, speaking from that point, right? Like, when I've had certain scrutiny or being called out for something, I'm like, this is BS, right? Or if I get just given a lot more pressure and a lot more stress, I'm like, this is BS. But no one's doing that to me, right? And no one's making me feel the way I feel except for me. And so I really appreciate that lesson. I think it's one of the most crucial things that we can continue on in this challenging thing called life, and this even more challenging thing oftentimes with first responder life. So, man, you covered so many things, and maybe the last thing I want to hit on is that notion of fall from grace, and that is very self-assigned. And sometimes we do it to ourselves as a culture, right? Like, we're very negative. We eat our own. I will admit this because I'm a little bit ashamed of it, and that I want people to think about this. But years ago, I heard of a guy I really don't know, truly. Like, I kind of barely knew his name, but he became a new chief in a city in the region. And he had a really short stint, and it became this, like, vote of no confidence rumor, and then he was out. And I said to my boss at the time, and I was like, man, what a way to go out. What a fall from grace. I think I used the exact same words. He's like, how do you know? I love that, right? Like, that's a good ass boss. That's a good mentor, because how did I know? I didn't know shit. I didn't know anything. And who was I? Like, and that's where I'm embarrassed to say it, but I want people to learn the lesson, because I think we all do it to some degree. And maybe sometimes we do it to ourselves, to your point, right? Like an at-will employee, like a chief, maybe he was doing all the right things and standing up for what he believed in. Maybe he said all those things when he got hired, and then he got a different message, or maybe the culture pushed him out. I don't know, right? I don't know anything about that situation personally. So who am I to say anything and further that rumor? So I love that, like, check yourself, because we eat our own.
We do. We pride ourselves in it. It's a sport. There are some organizations that it's like a sport, and I've seen it done, and it's
destroy
distasteful.
The weakness, right? It's a perceived weakness, or perceived not usness. I mean, I remember a group of officers that I came into, and I was among, and the squad was called a pack of jackals, and they were that way. And I was glad. I'm glad still, looking back, they didn't see me as prey. They didn't eat me up. I was just kind of doing my thing, right? But they were definitely doing that to other people. And we've come a long way from that, I think, in a lot of places, and just spaces being aware of that. But man, Doug, we've covered quite a bit of ground, and there's a lot more. And I know that we could keep going for another hour or two, but I also know that some people, there's a rare example. Some people are like, hey man, yeah, like, the episode's like perfect for a commute, but sometimes they go long. I'm like, I know, I should just revisit. So I think we're going to put a pin in it. And what I was going to say is, there's one dude that recently messaged me. He's like, man, all your episodes end like right when I'm like getting, like, I want more. And I'm like, are those like the 20-minute ones? He's like, no, they're all of them. And I was like, well, most of them are like an hour, man. So I'm sorry. Like, it's not going to, I'm no Rogan here. But all to say, man, like, I appreciate so much the time and experience and wisdom and connection with you. Ongoing. I'm excited to have you back on to talk more. I have more notes from the first read of your book that we could peel back more. But man, is there anything kind of want to wrap on and leave the listeners with? And of course, where they can find you, your show, your book.
Oh man, I've been asked this question a lot, and I come up with different answers. But first, I think you'll find a lot of value in what you're doing. if I was to tell your listeners anything, be mindful, take care of yourself physically, emotionally, socially, with your family, take care of your career. All of the things that you're doing are the things that everyone should be doing. I love what you're putting out through Blue Grit Radio and wellness. And, these are things that I'm learning myself. Just be kind to yourself and know that you should be living better. There are people out there who love you and who are actively looking for ways to help you show up the best for them and the best for yourself. And, there's 800,000 cops out there working right now. There's 800,000 different combinations of how this stuff presents and works. Find that thing or that combination of things for yourself. You deserve to be living better. Give yourself a break. You're more than that uniform. You're more than what you're getting paid to do. Man, I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity to sit down with you and just speak to your listeners. And I love what you're doing. As far as how to find me, you can find me on most of the streaming platforms that tell this story. You can find me on Instagram at tell_this_story. You can buy the book at any retailer. Just visit DougWhiteOfficial.com. All the links, all the stuff is there. Follow me. I love communicating with people and just connecting with folks. I'm not here collecting. We talked about this before we started recording, that I'm not collecting, and neither are you. People, we want, real connections, authentic connections with people. That's how we learn and that's how we grow. So reach out, talk to me, ask me questions. I'd be more than happy. And I can't wait to come back on and go through that list. I feel like I'm waiting for the next episode of my favorite show, and I'm mad that I have to wait now.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So thanks, bro.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for sharing. It's been good, and more to come. And more to come. You're on fire. It's fun to watch you, and I'm going to be continuing to watch, what you're up to next. Certainly not just popping up on some shows. When you find Doug's stuff, you'll see like he's on an upward trajectory. So good one to watch.
I appreciate that, man. And I'm very grateful for the time and the words. And I'm happy to be on mission with folks like you in this space, and our friend John Kelly. I think that's 3 or 4 now.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot of shout outs. Yeah.
John's going to have to sponsor this episode.
We're have to take him down a peg after this one.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, buddy,
Thanks,
I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes, there's a lot of candidates that want to take the next step in the organization and promote. However, they find themselves at an impasse with where to start. If getting selected for the next rank is of interest to you, I highly recommend you do your homework and you recognize resources. And part of doing that homework and recognizing resources is the guide I've prepared. It hones in on a lot of my lessons learned from being on both sides of the table. So for more on the guide, you can find it at bluegritwellness.com. That's the promotional guide at bluegritwellness.com/shop. And whether or not you are looking to promote, we all know those people that should be taking the next test that we keep nudging. And those people need to be empowered. They need to find confidence. And a lot of that can come from you just giving them that nod, giving them that support, that encouragement, and telling them where to find the guide.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.